Hi, Kylie. Say, I'm going to do this demo here using your die line, and you've got a couple good questions regarding the mock-up and why it's doing maybe certain things. And before I jump into that, I think I think this mock-up can work. I think there's some different things that need to be done, maybe kind of post working on this furnished mockup file, and I think that's going to be the case with most digital mockups. Sometimes you find a perfect fit, other times you find something that can work, but you got to do some, again, post original file Photoshop editing and tweaking. But I think, you know, if you can find a digital mockup that at least gives you a starting point like we have here, I think that's good. The first thing is sometimes the mockups will have, they all have shading and shadow effects built into them and mask layers set up. And sometimes you have to get in there and dig around a little bit to find out why it might be doing certain things. In other words, when we brought that panel in, when you brought the panel in, when I did as well on the side here, it took your nice dark design and kind of grayed it out, kind of gave it that washed out look or feeling or effect. And I think if I dig down into the layering, I'm just going to kind of get into there and find out, number one, where is that design? Because with many of the mockups, you guys will find there's multiple layers, and sometimes whoever builds the mockup doesn't necessarily name those layers in a manner where you can go in and kind of deconstruct or easily identify. So you kind of have to click and toggle through sometimes to find those. So at least we know we got a white box and a dark square box. So I know it's in the dark square box, and I've got one panel. That's, as I'm toggling through, that's the panel that's kind of giving us some problems here. It's not really giving us an authentic look, right? It's kind of grayed out. And I think what they tried to do when they built this mock-up, whoever that designer was, whoever that technician was that built the mock-up, laid in that kind of grayed out panel there to achieve kind of a shadowed effect. Problem is, when you get darker panels like you do with your real heavy, darker, saturate design, it gives a kind of an odd feel. It's not very authentic looking. So what I've done here is, once I've identified that panel for the dark box, let's get in there. We just had it left side and right side. I'm going to double click on that layer, the right side layer. Double click over here. It'll bring up the layer style and some of the filter techniques that are used on there. And this is what I suggest with all mockups. If there's something that's a little funky or something's a little weird going on, get in there, and you can't hurt it. You're not going to destroy anything, but kind of tweak with the opacity. Well, that's the opacity of the graphic we brought in there. But as far as the blend mode opacity, okay, all of a sudden we're achieving something that's a little more authentic or realistic looking if we up that opacity even more, so darker. If you can see it may not be coming through on the video detail, but the front panel, or that what they refer to as the right panel, is a little more washed out, less opaque than that interior panel. So I'm just tweaking those layer styles until I get to the point where I'm achieving something that I think is a little more authentic looking. So again, you can do that just by double clicking on those layers once you identify where they are, and finding out what, if I hover over this, the little double circle there indicates that there's filter effects. And if there are filter effects, you can, again, you can just double click and it'll open up the layer style palette, and you can tweak that effectively. So that's why it was giving us that kind of gray, weird, washed out look. The second thing, and I think I'm not expecting that you guys produce mockups that include the product, and in this case you've got a window cut or a vignette cut that will feature the product inside of the packaging. But what I'll suggest for portfolio, when we get into the portfolio development class, is if you've got designs that include other staged components to your mock-ups, to your designs. For instance, a coffee cup or a coffee mug, that you incorporate those into your mock-ups. So it gives a sense, it validates what the purpose, the function of, in this case, this mug packaging does. It's not just a box. Oh, by the way, there's a mug here. So what we're going to do first is I think I identified which mug. There was 2 mugs on the site. I'm pretty sure it was your decimal. We were focusing on, and the beauty of the Etsy mug assignment is the majority of you guys selected an Etsy seller that had decent product renderings, decent catalog kind of hero shots of the mugs available. So I'm going to look at, I don't know, one of these. What I'm looking at is the actual reflection. This is one that's particularly challenging just due to the reflective quality here, so it may give us a little bit of a challenge. And I'm going to look for an angle here that maybe gives us the best advantage. And I think that's going to do. I don't need to go crazy here. I'm going to right click. I'm not doing this as a high res. If I was really doing this as a high-end rendering, I'd probably magnify the screen, try to download the most high-res screen capture of it possible. For this demo, I'm just going to do a copy image, right click again, and I'm going to paste this into where am I going to paste this? And that's one of the things you're going to want to be careful of, is that you don't drop it into some location that it can't be recovered, or drop it into a folder somewhere. I'm going to drop it in on top. I'm going to transform it. It's tiny. Yes, I know that. But actually, before I get too carried away, maybe that might be the better mug. And I'll explain why in just a second. Copy image. I'm going to drop that in. I'm going to drop this in there. I'm going to transform, and I'm just dropping a couple different mugs in. And the reason I grabbed this one in particular was because I think the angle that we're viewing it on, I'm just going to isolate it. I'm going to select invert that and just ditch the exterior there. Deselect it. I'm going to put this mug over to the side. I'm going to take this mug. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm doing a quick just isolation, just kind of a rough cut. Select, I'm going to invert that. So I'm selecting the exterior. I'm just cutting that out of there. Deselect that. Now I can look at these 2 different mugs and kind of in my mind's eye get a sense of, perspective, which is maybe looks like it's on the same visual plane as the boxes. Clearly this one here, because it's viewed kind of 3/4 view and slightly elevated, right? We can see the tops. It's not this kind of classic profile shot, straight on, a lower degree of angle of view. So clearly this one here. So that's why I jumped back into the Etsy sellers page and grab that one. So we've got this cup, got a background there. If I was actually gonna do this as more of a high-end, like print quality rendering, what I would strongly advise is using the pen tool. The pen tool works very effective for isolating those graphics in transform in Photoshop and creating a mask or a cut layer or a cut effect to delete that content. I'm just going to blow that mug up a little bit. And I'm going to ignore the fact that we can see the photographer. It's not the best photo. It's nice. It's an attractive mug. Kind of cool, but I'm just going to scale it kind of proportionally. So challenge here. A lot of the Etsy sellers have a nice white background. We've got some things to kind of strategize and see if we can't eliminate. I'm going to do this as a real rough cut. Tell you what, I'm going to use a pen tool just because I'm a pen tool nut. And as I'm doing that, And come up to about here, down to here. And this is a pretty interpolated image. It's got a lot of artifact. I know that it's distorted just because I grabbed such a low, you know, a small kind of screen grab of that product. And again, if I was doing this for an actual, you know, print or catalog shot, or something that was going to be a little higher end rendering on my portfolio site, I would, what would I do? I'd contact the seller. I'd buy the mug, and then I'd photograph it. There we go. I'm just going to shorten that handle a little bit, come up here. And again, I'm doing a really rough cut of this mug. Come in here, I'm going to shorten that handle a little bit. I'm holding the Option key down. So as you guys are working, if you're using the pen tool, which you should be if you're doing some higher level work, learn the key manipulation. And as you're working with Photoshop and the pen tool, it's going to work very much the same way as it does in Illustrator, right? So if you don't like the pen tool, learn to like it, because it's a highly effective method to isolate, to mask out areas, to create, you know, kind of a harder vectored mask than just using the magic wand or something like that. So again, I'm kind of guessing as I go around this thing. I'm not trying to, you know, I'm not using high levels of precision here. So once you've created that vectored shape with the pen tool, and as you're working with the pen tool, make sure that in Photoshop, you grab the pen tool, then you're creating a path. Okay, so in the upper right-hand corner on your taskbar, your toolbar, you'll see the ability to create either a path, or you can do a shape. We've created a path. Now I'm going to go over to the path menu, or path dialog, and in the upper right-hand corner, the little hamburger there, you're going to click on that. You'll also see a thumbnail of your path that you created, the most recent one that you created. And you're going to make the selection. You're going to keep the feathered radius at 0. We're making just a nice clean cut. And there you go. So we've created this, you know, marqueed selection of the mug. But instead of selecting the mug, I'm going to select everything around the exterior of it. So what am I doing? Select. I'm going to invert the selection. Delete, and there we go. So we got the mug isolated. We're going to knock the handle out real quickly here. I'm going to do that the same way with the pen tool, making sure it's selected on path. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go to here. I'm going to go to here. And kind of, you know, as you guys are working with the pen tool, economy of points. In other words, the fewer points you can kind of make, the more graceful or fluid the line activity is, and that's good enough. So again, we've got the path created. We're going to jump over to the path palette. We're going to see that we've got this tiny little working path there. Go up to the make a selection and 0 pixels for the radius. That's if you want to feather or grow or reduce your path. There's sometimes where that will be an effective method. In this case, I'm just trimming this mug out. So. And then I'm going to knock out the interior of the handle. Deselect that. Now I've got a mug, reasonably speaking, that looks like it kind of sort of belongs here. It belongs in that plane somehow, maybe. Anyways, we're going to leave that mug alone for a moment, and we're going to jump back to the layers. The mug is on the top, and just because it's something I should do, I'll call it mug 1. And I'm also looking at kind of the shadow effect here too, off the box. If I want to, let's say I want one of the mugs on the outside, maybe that'll, you know, cast some shadow or light. I don't know, and I'll just throw it in the box. So what I'm going to do is we've got the background box where the window is facing to the left, and then I'm going to put the front of this box or the cutout on that right-hand panel. So I'm gonna go to the right-hand side design here, right-hand side, right-hand side, top side, right-hand side. So let's just jump there. And I got your die line here. I'm gonna copy that marquee, that front. I'm gonna go to the right-hand side, double click on that layer, just like I did with previous demos where we're building mock-ups. I'm going to transform that. And I know there's your die line is a little different shape than the mock-up we're using here. We may have to model that later, or I can give suggestions of how to do that, just changing the aspect ratio of your final file. But we've got that dropped into place. I'm not going to worry about, again, I'm not doing this perfectly clean here where I've got your part of your die line is showing up on there, or part of your through cut, I should say, is showing up on your mock-up rendering here. So let's not worry about that. Let's pretend it's not there. Jump over there. And there's our front of the packaging. And just for kicks, I'm going to do the right-hand side as well. And we'll get rid of that front. I'm just jumping between. Get another one there. There it is. I can't find anything. My daughter's wrestling with her puppy in the background. Are you having fun with the dog, Red? I can hear that. Okay, so we're looking at that. We're going to look at the left-hand side of the design. Sure. And we're going to pop that in, I think. Something seems weird there. And we're going to transform it. I'm holding the shift down, and again, I know that your die line is a little bit different dimensional qualities. But for the purpose of just mocking this up with the product in place, we're going to pretend. We're going to save that. We're going to look at this. We're going to go to that. So we've got the design fleshed out here. So again, we've got one design where the box is facing one way and one where it's facing the other way. I'm going to go now into that bottom because it is that grayed out panel that I talked about at the very beginning of this is annoying me. So we're going to go to the light box, dark box, white box. There it is. Let's collapse some stuff here so we can see what we're doing. Our right side of the box. Let's collapse that. Too many things open. Right side of the design. So for me, sometimes, depending on how complex mock-ups can get sometimes, really the challenge is trying to figure out where I'm at in any given, mock-up. So it can be kind of a pain sometimes. The opacity, I'm going to drop that opacity. What if I darken that? I'm going to darken it as well. Fill opacity. And those are maxed out too, so we're not going to be able to do anything with that. So I think pumping it up adds a little density to it. It's not like with the shadow effect. I think it's a dirty screen that doesn't help. Shadow effect, you're not going to notice things that dramatically. What we could do to add a little, tweak of dimension to this is to go to that left side and knock the opacity of the left side down just a touch, because we've got light reflecting off of it. So it's going to pick up some of the surrounding background. It's theoretically in a seamless white or a light gray background. So it's going to pick up some of that reflective quality. So if I knock the opacity of that layer, the blend mode down a little bit, it gives us a little sense of dimension there. Highlight, darker spot for the shadow. So the last thing I'm going to do is, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get that out of there. I'm going to jump to that. I'm going to deselect. I'm going to get the marquee, rectangle marquee, and I'm going to grab real quickly the cool design for the top of your packaging. March it over. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to jump up here. Top side design here. That must mean that. Paste that in, and I know I'm gonna need to do a rotate. Shift. It's probably gonna, this is gonna distort a bit, so I'm gonna hold that shift down. I know it's distorting your design, but maybe with foreshortening it won't be as dramatic. It's just the nature of the beast we're working with here with regard to the mock-up. So I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna jump to there, and what? Rotated it, you would think I would have gotten it right. This way, do you think? Maybe. Everyone's, I'm probably doing it wrong. There it is. We get a little white reveal there, like the cut of the box. Again, we get the blue there, die line. Let's pretend that doesn't exist. So what I'm going to pretend that I've got this whole thing fleshed out, and I've done my tweaking, and I've got my filtered effects of the layer styles all refined the way I want them. I'm going to click on the top side, and I'm going to knock that down so it's maybe a little lighter. It's popping up a little more light. I don't know, whatever. That's too much. But so when you're done with your design, what I'm going to suggest is that you, number one, we're going to get the mug out of there for now. So I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to delete that layer out of there. I know I'm kind of, okay, let's do that. Let's do that. So all I did is hit the layer. I'm going to take the image. I'm going to flatten the image now. I would suggest keep a working file with all the layers. Should have mentioned that first. Then I'm going to flatten the file. Now I'm going to save it as a JPEG. And I'm just going to call it test. I'm going to put it on the desktop just so I can find the thing. And we're going to save it as a JPEG because we just need a flattened file. That's it for now. Test desktop JPEG. And that should be good. All right, so now we have a flattened file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in my mug that I had from the previous layered Photoshop file. I'm just going to throw one there and tell you what, I'm going to duplicate it. So we got a couple mugs, and there we got two of them. And we're going to take that. What are we going to do? We're going to do. We're just going to flip one that way. Why are we going to do that? Because I don't want the handle showing up in the container. So it's going to go inside of that container. So what we're going to do is I'm going to throw this layer copy of the most recent mug, that mug, behind the other. Behind. I can't unlock it. There we go. It was a background layer, and it was locked, so I couldn't do anything with it. So that layer is beneath the background layer. So I got a mug on top. I've got the layer of the mock-ups that we put together, and the mug underneath it. Now what I'm going to do is use the polygon lasso tool, and I'm going to do a quick super cut from a mile away. And we're just going to slice that window out of there. I'm going to delete that. Oh, wrong. Make sure you're on the right layer, people. Delete, knock the mug out of there, deselect it. Just for clarity's sake, what I'm going to do is create a new layer. I'm going to end up creating a number of new layers here. I'm just going to call this the interior box. So I know what the heck I'm dealing with. Throw the interior of the box at the very bottom because that's theoretically kind of the background. And what am I going to do with the box? I'm guessing that, Kylie, I'm guessing you want the interior of the box to be white. If you wanted it to be a different color, you certainly could at that time create ignore that, people. You could at that time create whatever background color you want. So I've got the interior of the box. I'm going to flood that with white. Actually, if I turn off all the layers, all I've done is filled up a layer, you know, the very base layer with white. So it's not like magic. Not like filling an actual box with anything. I've got my mug inside, so now I'm going to kind of scale that proportionately. Or in theory, sometimes you got to kind of fudge it a little bit, so it becomes a little more believable. Oh, this isn't too terrible. Maybe I'll reduce it just a smidge. I don't know, somewhere in there. I think you guys get the idea. So all of a sudden, it's starting to look like a mug that might be inside the container. One of the things I want to do here, though, is I'm going to duplicate that layer. I'm duplicating the mug that's inside of there. I'm going to hide one of them, and I'm going to flip it over again. I just wanted to see what it would look like with the handle in there. I don't know. It's an option. I guess I'm going to put it this way, maybe. Yeah. You guys figure it out. As you're doing your mock-ups, you figure it out. And again, I want to restate that I don't expect you guys to do this level of execution for the final submission for the mock-ups. If you've got your graphics applied to your mock-ups and it looks believable, reasonably believable, and it helps validate what your design would look like as a dimensional design, I'm good with that. We can get to the window cuts and stuff a little bit later, but I know, you know, I've got several of you guys who are really interested in how to execute a little more polished or a more accurate mock-up. So I've got one one cup in there. I'm going to ditch the one layer just because I don't need it. So I'm going to jump down to my interior box layer. That's the white background that's in there, and build another layer on top of that. And I'm going to call it the shadow layer. And in a case where, again, if I'm doing something a little higher level, what I might be doing is building multiple shadow layers in there. So in this case, what I want to do is build some dimension to this container that looks a little more authentic. So I'm using the marquee tool here, and I'm identifying kind of the contours of the box. I'm looking right now at this line up on top because I know the bottom line is going to follow that same trajectory. It's just the way things work. And I'm going to go all the way to the top here, over to here, and back down to the bottom. I'm just marqueing that area. Now I'm going to grab the brush tool, and I'm going to give myself a nice, large, soft-edged brush, knocking the opacity, the flow rate way down. In other words, the amount of color that comes out of there is going to be knocked, you know, down considerably. Giving myself a cooler color. Generally, shadows are cool. And if I knock the opacity down here, what it's going to do is just give me some great sensitivity as far as how it allows me to drop shadow down into that box. Okay, so if I turn the layers off, oops, not all of them, you'll see that I've just created this kind of shadow effect, seemingly on the white background or the interior of the box, but it is a separate layer. So I can shut all of these layers off and build a rendering that is, you know, reasonably authentic. Now what I'm going to do is invert my selection. So instead of, you know, spraying some, you know, shadow on that interior panel, I'm going to invert my selection, and I'm going to drop in some shadow underneath that. Probably a little darker there, and deselect that. So it gives me something that's a little more authentic, right? So all of a sudden I can start to see the inside of the box taking shape to a certain degree. And again, if I turn the layers off, you see it's nothing special, actually. It's just some weird shadows. And there it is. There, just submit that. It's this weird abstract. But I think it's starting to come around. Maybe it's just maybe it's the illusion that it's starting to come around. Smoothing at 0. I'm gonna up the smoothing just a little bit. There we go. It was stepping, so I was getting some weird stepping effect. So you can go to a number of different degrees. So if I was doing this a little more higher level for print quality or for a final rendering execution, I'd be probably building multiple layers. I'm just going to throw another top shadow. I tell you guys I'm not going into detail, and then I just go ahead and go into detail. So on this top layer, which will actually be on top of the mug, I'm kind of moving things around where I want them to be. I'm going to knock down some of the mug reflection, reduce the brush size a little bit, because the mug is just popping too much from this one side. On top, it's just a little too, it's got, too much stuff going on there. So I'm dropping a little shadow in there. It is a crazy mug. So if you guys are working with a different type of mug texture pattern, I'd probably pick something, or Kylie did, one of the most challenging products because of the reflective quality that this particular mug has. So if I wanted to create, if I said, it might be nice to show the actual mug outside, as we often do with product shots or packaging shots, just to give a point of reference for what the product looks like with the companion packaging. I would probably put a layer on top of my main packaging layer. In other words, a layer on top of that stuff that's disappearing. And I call it whatever I want. Top shadow. And then what are we going to do? We're going to go in here. I'm looking at the shadow effects off of the box, right? So we're going to get some, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge, and I'm probably going to really do a crummy job. And just upping my brush size, taking a look at this. And the nice thing is, if you are working with separate layers for yourself, sorry about the pause there. If you're working with separate layers for yourself, it's like you can always go back in there and revise things, refine things if something got a little carried away on you. And play with either erase it, start over, or you can play with the opacities or the values of your individual layers, with different translucency, and knock the transparency down a little bit. So I'm gonna go large. I would probably actually spend quite a bit of time on this. Shadow, and probably come in there with eraser and knock down some of those white highlights that are happening on the mug itself. Jumping around, help if I stay in the program I was in, and go into that mug, probably jump on the top layer mug, go in and what do I do? Oh, yeah. Welcome to too many programs open. If you knock some of those highlights down, and I'm being really crude with my rendering here, the other option is to use the magic wand and mask that area, and you can come in with a softer brush, reduce that brush way down, and drop. Make sure you're on that layer, and invert your selection. So I'm masking on the mug itself. So if I don't like some of those highlights, I can come in there and knock those down and create, you know, shadow effects on those areas that are popping just a bit too much. This mug is pretty challenging. Here I'm working right on the mug, kind of breaking my cardinal rule, but just for the sake of time, going in there. So now it doesn't pop as much. Get in there and soften up some of those shadow effects and shadow areas that are on that shadow layer, like the top shadow layer here. Refine that a little bit. There's some stepping and things going on there. But if I wanted to, let's say the shadow was you know, too dark for my taste, you know, I could amp that up or drop it down based on the opacity of that individual layer. So here we got something that is the start of, you know, a fairly realistic rendering. It needs quite a bit of tweaking yet before I would consider it ready for the portfolio. But it gives the designer a chance to at least share with the client, hey, this is what this you know, prototype design might look like, you know, when it's complete and as a digital rendering. Certainly, there's always an advantage to being able to put together a physical prototype. That's an absolute part of the equation in the development of new product packaging, or even a revised product packaging, is the physical prototype. But as a next best, and certainly for your online portfolios, you want to be able to put together a rendering that includes, in this case, the cool mug along with the cool packaging. So anyways, I hope that helps. Again, when you guys download mockups, some are very well executed. Other ones are a little bit kind of fly by the seat, and the designers or the technicians who put them together don't always necessarily use the best practices. But if you get in there and really identify and deconstruct how they built the file, it can help you put together a little, tweak it and create a little bit more realistic rendering. So, and again, the final caveat, I'm not expecting you guys to achieve this level. It's something to strive for when we start looking at developing your pieces for the portfolio down the line. All right. Thanks, guys.